Scrolling shoot-'em-up games tend to embrace tropes and trends possibly more so than titles in any other genre. To anyone who isn't a die-hard aficionado, this can make them seem wearisome and unworthy of deeper analysis. With their largely throwaway plots, overly familiar bullet hell routines and power-up mechanics, it's easy to see why a layman would skim over their nuances. A500/CDTV shooter Fantastic Voyage breaks the mold to a certain extent, in that it's based on a movie, and so the themes and dynamics of the game were largely fixed from the outset. Even in 1991, this would be considered an odd choice of license, since the movie in question is a clunky old sci-fi yarn harking back to 1966 that kids would likely not be familiar with. It stars Stephen Boyd, Raquel Welch, Edmund O'Brien, Donald Pleasance and Arthur Kennedy. Again, names that probably wouldn't have meant much to young gamers at the time. Now the story, that we could get on board with. Literally. Kind of. In the midst of the Cold War, both the Russians and Americans have masterminded highly sophisticated miniaturization technology that allows the military to shrink anyone and anything down to microscopic levels. This would be a huge scientific breakthrough for espionage and defensive purposes, except that the effects only last for precisely 60 minutes. Not a second more or less. Then the objects/people revert back to their true size no matter where they happen to be at the time. When the aim is to explore the inner workings of structures normally smaller than the human form, you can imagine the repercussions, I'm sure. In gaming terms, it wasn't a place the developers had to boldly go, seeing as a few men, and women, had already been there before. In honour of the same movie, 3 years later, Psygnosis would unofficially rehash the concept, only in 3D, with the release of Microcosm. Beforehand, however, Accolade explored similar territory via their 2D scrolling shooter Anatomic Man for the Amiga, while Rex Ronan, Experimental Surgeon, and Anatomy later offered a similar experience for SNES and Windows users, respectively. Officially licensed Fantastic Voyage games also exist for the Atari 2600, Spectrum, and Amstrad. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, luckily one scientist, Dr. Jan Beans, has hit upon the solution to the ephemeral shrinkage dilemma. As the Czechoslovakian gadget guru has been operating behind the Iron Curtain on behalf of the evil Red Tyranny, he will need to be extricated if his knowledge is to be exploited. The good news is, he's ready to switch sides. With the assistance of American intelligence agents, Beans slips free from the Russians' control and flees to the US. En route, travelling in an escorted car, however, an assassination attempt coordinated by the Eastern Bloc renders him comatose, with a dangerous blood clot fogging his precious brain. As the clot is located in an inoperable area, it's decided that a surgical team will be miniaturised and injected into Bean's body on a Navy submarine, christened Proteus, via the neck to access the site and destroy the clot, thereby saving his life.
Here's the overall target area.
Doctor?
Benish's brain, as near as we can map it stereotaxically. The clot is right here. It's impossible to get at without damage to the intervening tissue, which would prove fatal to Benish. The only way to reach it is via the arterial system.
Phase 1 calls for miniaturizing a submarine with crew and surgical team and injecting it into the carotid artery.
How small will it be?
About the size of a microbe. We're putting Benish in deep hypothermia.
What?
That's freezing him as low as is compatible with human life. It'll slow down his heartbeat, his circulation, and all other physical processes.
Well, even so, Colonel, because of our size, the lack of it, we'll still be cruising pretty fast. We'll be smashed to bits if there's any turbulence.
The only danger of turbulence is in the heart, and we're not going through it. Once in the carotid artery, we remain within the arterial system until we reach the point of the damage, where Dr. Duval will attempt to dissolve the clot with a laser beam. Thank you. After the operation, we return by way of the venous system until we reach the base of the neck, where we'll be removed. Right here, with a hypodermic.
Of course, the goal is to bring him back to consciousness so he can share the closely guarded secret of controllable miniaturization to further develop the US's military capabilities. His personal health and well-being aren't of much concern. because that's just the way the military works. Once the site of the clot has been reached, the plan is for DeVal to dissolve it with a ray gun style laser and escape the body before the crew begin to grow back to normal size.
How does it look, Doctor? If I can relieve the pressure on a few key vessels. Doctor, we've had it. If I can clear the central nerve, that may be enough.
Ramping up the sense of anticipation, another notch they must factor in is artificial ticking time bomb number 2. Hang around inside Bean's body too long and they'll be attacked by his own natural defences. That is, his immune system with its protective white corpuscles and antibodies. Complicating matters further, there's a saboteur on board the craft, believed to be responsible for damaging the laser. The US are wary of DeVal, the leading brain surgeon sent in to carry out the operation, yet have no choice other than to draw upon his expertise, as he's the best man for the job. Covering their backs, they send in their own medical professional to supervise, plus a layperson bodyguard to take care of the physical aspects of keeping the mission on track. Grant, the chisel-jawed Neanderthal of the party, and some of his superiors, serve to remind us that women are delicate creatures who shouldn't be lifting anything heavy or thinking too hard, unless it involves making a man's dinner or cleaning the house. Good to know. Thanks.
Miss Peterson volunteered to come along.
So did every male technician in this unit. A woman has no place on a mission of this kind.
I insist on taking my technician.
You'll take along who I assign.
Don't tell me who I'm going to work with, not on this operation or any other. I'll do what I think is best without any interference from anyone.
Has relied on Miss Peterson for years, and since she wants to come along, I think it's for the best, Dr. Reed.
Well, I disagree with you. Since you're in charge, go ahead and do as you please. Well, I want to go on record as being against it.
Bet you're pretty handy around the house. Can you cook?
We're pushing oxygen today.
I'll have some laughing gas, ma'am.
You sound as if you're not looking forward to it.
It's not exactly a pleasure cruise, you know.
I think it's very exciting. We're going to see things no one has ever seen before. Not just something under a microscope. Think about it.
That's the trouble I have. Being shrunk.
You may learn to like it. Excuse me.
For a nice young lady, you play with the damnedest toys, Miss Peterson.
That'll teach you where to keep your hand.
Now I know.
Nevertheless, keeping in mind the era in which the movie was made, it offers a refreshingly enlightened alternative, promoted through other characters. DeVal's assistant Cora is a strong-minded, capable and fearless female with a responsible job to do, maintaining the mission-critical laser and supporting the Doctor as his trusted right-hand wingwoman. It should also be noted that she is the first to volunteer to venture outside the relative safety of the Proteus on a reconnaissance errand. Then, as if to flush any goodwill reek down the toilet, the situation is contrived whereby Cora is attacked by body-hugging antibodies that must be plucked from her skin-tight wetsuit post-haste to avert suffocation. In interviews, the director, Richard Fleischer, reveals that in the first take the cast purposely avoided her breasts for propriety's sake. Only because it looked ridiculous in an emergency situation, creating a Las Vegas showgirl effect in Fleischer's words, they were instructed to retake the scene, minus the chivalry. With nothing off limits, everyone made a beeline for her chest, and it appeared lascivious as well as ridiculous. Finally, the cast were assigned areas of the body to clear/fondle, and this version was given the green light. It still looks as hammy as Porky Pig balancing a ham sandwich on his snout, so they might have been better off cutting the scene altogether.
They're tightening up. Please. I can't breathe. I can't.
crystallized.
Despite planning to steer well clear of the heart to avoid violent turbulence, an arteriovenous fistula forces the Proteus to be rerouted right into the danger zone. Starting in the next carotid artery on a journey towards the brain, that's quite a dramatic time-wasting detour. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Dun dun dun. Monitoring the calamity from the control room, the sugar-fueled General Carter and his advisors determine that stopping the heart for no more than 60 seconds will be safe for the patient, as well as permitting the crew to pass through unharmed. With a dozen or so micro-radar detectors assigned to establish the Proteus's position, overseen by an army of surgeons, the plan is executed successfully. Hurrah! We're back on track. Gasp. Oh heck, what now? Passing through the inner ear, another dire threat is introduced. Science, in inverted commas, informs us that the tiniest noise could cause shockwaves to engulf the Proteus, killing everyone on board. Better warn the medical team to keep stun then, and definitely not to drop any surgical appliances. That could be fatal. You could easily imagine this was deliberately orchestrated to keep the viewers on the edge of their cinema seats. Fancy that. Ultimately, upon reaching the blood clot, the team have just 6 minutes to perform the operation and evacuate. It's looking feasible until the real saboteur is revealed. Michaels, played by Donald Pleasance, the man assigned to monitor the suspect. Who'da thunk it? Just because he played the bad guy in all his previous roles, we shouldn't make assumptions. In spite of his best efforts to crash the sub, he's overcome by aggressive leukocytes and perishes, leaving the more trustworthy members of the crew to complete the objective and escape through a tear duct in the corner of one eye. Just in the nick of time, obviously.
What is it?
That blip we're picking up might only be a radioactive particle. The Proteus may already be destroyed.
What are you getting at?
If I were in their place and I were running out of time, I'd abandon ship before I grew to dangerous size and use the extra few minutes to get out the quickest way possible on my own.
Along the optic nerve to the eye.
Wait 30 seconds. Glass slide, quick. Open that door, please.
This is depicted in-game in one of the introductory stills, an image duplicated from the movie's promotional artwork. Centaur Software, who developed the licensed Amiga game, chose to skip past the movie's prolonged preamble, straight to the miniaturization incident. We briefly witness the process by an animated cutscene, and then, boom, we're inside the scientist's body navigating his labyrinthine innards. In contrast, it takes over 5 minutes for the first words to be uttered on the big screen, and another 35 minutes before the crew are finally lodged in the submarine and ready to roll. It's the very definition of tedium. Though I do like the bit where Skeptical Grant is convinced of the possibility of miniaturization following a single sentence of explanation.
I'll take that call.
Yes, sir. I don't mean to be inquisitive, but this CMDF, for all I know, it could stand for the Consolidated Mobilization of Delinquent Females.
Combined Miniature Deterrent Forces.
Say that again.
We can reduce anything down to any size we want. People, ships, tanks, planes.
General, I've heard some wild ones, but this takes it.
We can shrink an army with all its equipment, put in a bottle cap. That's why we call it Combined Miniature Deterrent Forces.
If the other side ever gets hold of a thing like that.
They have, but we both have the same problem. Lack of control. They can only keep things miniaturized for exactly 60 minutes. After that, everything starts growing back to its original size.
I assume Banish knows how to control it.
That's right. He wanted us to have the secret, not them. That's why they tried to kill him.
They'll probably try again. No wonder you want me to stand by during the operation.
And take a little trip with him.
With the Apollo 11 moon landing only 3 years away, I suppose anything seemed possible. If that happened at all. Nudge, wink, nudge, wink, wink, nudge. It's the lack of human characterization right up until the last cutscene in the game that helps to slice through the flabby build-up, yet simultaneously makes it difficult to connect with the hero of the hour, given that this is merely a lump of submerged metal as opposed to Grant, played by Stephen Boyd. Several other alterations were more critical to making this a feasible game conversion. In the movie, the crew don't possess any weapons other than the laser, and that's really more of a surgical tool than something used to attack opponents or defend themselves. Obviously, in a shoot-'em-up game, assaulting enemies rather than avoiding them is essential. Accordingly, we find that our sub is armed with missiles and various other weapons become available as we progress. With these, we're tasked with destroying most of the physiological debris that litters Bean's body, or else be obliterated by it. In any case, if we can wipe out 3 of these critters or obstructions in a row, our shield receives a welcome boost in strength, so mounting an offensive reaps rewards. Plus, passageways are often so narrow you'll struggle to squeeze through without first clearing a path. Evoking a sense of claustrophobia appears to have been the goal, and Centaur certainly nailed it. From the outset and throughout the 3 lengthy levels, the Proteus is interpreted as a foreign invader that must be eliminated, as in the later stages of the movie, making time a precious commodity. Ramping up the tension, the action sequences take place over a period of exactly 1 hour to reflect the artificially enforced time frame of the salvage operation, quite a few years before TV series 24 made this their signature gimmick. Proteus is under the control of humans, and as we know, they need oxygen to breathe. No, really, it is true. I do aim to educate. This is injected into the body in canisters in the game. They can be found floating randomly for our sustenance. Back in 1966, it was a bit more complicated. The crew would exit the sub in the lungs to extract oxygen from passing alveoli, repressurizing the hold. Ditto for fuel. It's essential that canisters are gathered to ensure we have enough to keep moving, presumably since we don't have a nuclear reactor on board, or a microscopic particle of nuclear fuel to hand. Analogous to the movie, the goal is to reach the blood clot in the brain and go to work with a precision laser gun. The difference in the game is that we must first build it from 9 circuit boards found scattered throughout the body. Why they wouldn't have already done this before embarking on the Odyssey is a mystery. But whatever, it gives us another challenging subtask to attend to along the way. 3 developers spent 9 months producing the game, and you can certainly see why. Most of the parasites and antibodies were drawn based on electron microscope photographs taken of real anatomy to ensure they were accurate, whilst other entities spring from novel, fictional origins. This becomes apparent as you approach the finale, and the situation takes an abrupt turn towards the bizarre. The manual, which accompanies the game, reinforces this point. Much of what you will see inside the human body during the game is based upon scientific fact. However, Fantastic Voyage is a mixture of fact and fantasy. In Level 1 you will experience graphics based upon electron microscope photographs of the interiors of blood vessels, and various blood cell types like leukocytes and erythrocytes. But you will also have to deal with cancer cells which crawl around and fire weapons. You will also encounter other hazards which are purely fictional creations. Naturally, the backdrops too were inspired by the physiology of the human body. Although, this being a 90s Amiga game, and with the developers focusing intently on presentation, they are enhanced by colour-cycled parallax scrolling routines in various neon spectrums, and a clever rippling effect to signify we are travelling through various liquid solutions. Again, this topic is visited in the manual. The backgrounds in the subatomic world of Level 2 are based upon the tracks created in the bubble chambers of particle accelerators when they are subjected to beams of subatomic particles called neutrinos. Other objects in Level 2, such as protons, gluons, quarks and other particles, had to be artistic creations, since no one has ever seen them. Level 3's backgrounds are based upon electron microscope photographs of the brain's neural network. To appreciate these backdrops to their fullest, our sub is equipped with floodlights illuminating the area immediately surrounding it, alternately unveiling and cloaking the terrain as we manoeuvre. It's an impressive feat, one that neatly explains how it is we can see anything at all located this deep within the human body. Something the producers of the movie forgot to take into consideration. Plot holes and continuity problems are a common theme throughout, exacerbated by a commendable novelisation by Isaac Asimov that goes to great lengths to make the science logical and credible. Due to the movie being delayed, this was published 6 months prior to its cinematic release, sweeping a spotlight over the many inherent flaws. That, I suppose, is the inevitable drawback of employing the godfather of sci-fi to enhance your work. Thanks to coder Mark Horlitzek, the controls are straightforward and practical. Holding fire, you can manoeuvre back and forth, whilst continuing to shoot in the same direction. Releasing the button and pushing in the opposite direction to the one in which we are travelling allows us to turn around and shoot the other way to eliminate threats creeping up from behind. Unfortunately, the usual music or sound effects toggle applies, and music is only available for owners of Amigas equipped with 1 MB of RAM. Fantastic Voyage's controls would be really helpful but for the strange push scrolling mechanism that waits for us to reach the edge of the screen before adjusting the playfield. Permitting little time to react, the incredibly tough game is made that much harder. This applies equally to the beginner's difficulty level. There are 3 grades from which to select, differentiated by the number of hits we can sustain before going hull up. The nautical equivalent of going belly up, obviously. Duh. At which point we're transported back over what feels like an unreasonable proportion of old ground. The trusty manual also has some helpful advice with regards to optimising your enjoyment of the game. In order to get maximum fun and excitement from Fantastic Voyage, we strongly recommend that you play the game in a darkened room with the contrast control of your monitor set to high. Pump up the volume and turn out the lights. To me, the gameplay isn't sufficiently robust to convince me to endure the pain. Regardless, the hypnotic aesthetics and sense of wonder conjured by Christian Fleckenstein's graphics, nestled with the mysterious intrigue of Bjorn Lind's 23-minute-long synth-pop soundtrack, make it compulsive viewing. Much like the strangely alluring, gloriously antiquated movie it aims to evoke.